thank Kelly for the invitation to be here, and for Ben for giving us a lot of the data right there, the details, because that's not my job. No, I don't. The research has been done. The evidence is here. We know that this is a issue that rings true, and it rings positive among parents, policymakers, and among those on the left and on the right, to be honest with you. While we didn't get a single Democrat to vote for the education savings account in Nevada, it's not that they didn't want to. I've had several phone calls after the fact. What was lacking was a little bit of political courage and a little bit of conviction. I think that they just need to see how this is going to work before they start jumping on board. But I can assure you that I've had several phone calls, one from a colleague who said, Senator, I have with me a really good friend. She would like to know more about the education savings accounts, and can you get her started on this, because I think it's wonderful. Like, sure. Where was your vote? So I'd like to thank Kelly. I'd like to thank Ben. I'd like to thank the Friedman Foundation, who really got me going on this. And I'm grateful to have Leslie Heiner here, who's from the Friedman, as well as your colleague from behind, Susan, who I met with for a little bit. I know she lives here in Atlanta. And this is the second time that Leslie's come to hear me speak. And I'm not saying that she came here just to hear me speak, but she said it. So it must be true. And it's almost like having a sort of a groupie, which is kind of, again, weird. Especially with somebody of stature as she has. But more than anything, I'd like to thank, I have one really good friend who's here with me today. He and I have known each other since living in Alaska. And so Wade and Angie Torp, who are in the back, they live here. Matter of fact, their son goes to Kennesaw State. And, it's always humbling to be here and talking and having a lifelong friend listen to what you've become and what you believe in. So I appreciate you being here and taking the time to drive all the way here, because I know they live a mile away and it took them an hour to get here. Seriously, your traffic is horrible here. What's going on? Again, I feel like my job is not necessarily to talk about the statistics and whether or not we're really into, do people like school choice or not. I think the evidence is there. And as Victor Hugo once said, an idea, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm never going to get it right. It's not my style. But as he said, an idea whose time has come is stronger than any army on earth. And I think that's what we have here, is an idea whose time has come. And that is that money should follow the students. That we are actually at an age where we can wrap around an individualized education around every single student. Because as we know, because most of us have kids, you can have 4 kids come from the same parents, and every single one of them is going to be a little bit different, with different needs, different learning styles, different wants. Everything is going to be a little different. And that's what we need. We're at that age where we can do that. I'm very appreciative of the fact that we had some people come up here and talk about some of these micro-education systems that we have. And that's really what the ESA is. And Patrick, and I apologize, I got your name wrong one time. It'll never happen again. As I tell my students all the time when they give answers, I said, don't be afraid to give the wrong answer, because it's when you give the wrong answer and you find out you're wrong, you'll never forget that. And so I'll always make sure I got your name, Patrick. It's not Paul. But Patrick, I think, hit the nail on the head when he said that the education savings account is like that iOS system. It's like it basically is the operating system. It's the platform. As I always tell my colleagues, I said, somewhere out there, someone's got a great idea in education. Just the most amazing, most fantastic, most progressive idea in education. They just have never had a platform in which to deliver that. I have been accused in the press of passing this bill in order for me to be able to go around like I'm doing now to different states and talk about it, so I can get my rock star status and platinum status, so that people will know who I am everywhere I go. But the reality is, I've left my 4 children, my wife at home, and my job with kids that I teach or I'm around daily, and I love them dearly. I left them so that I can talk to people about, first of all, what is school choice. And believe it or not, I used to think everybody knew what school choice was, or I used to think that they knew what an ESA is, at the very least, maybe school choice. And I've come to find out that's not always true. Not everybody knows about it. It's just that I've been talking about it for so long. Not as long as some people, for 20 some odd years, they've been talking about this, but I've been talking about it a long time. I just assumed everybody knew it. That's not true. And I also assumed that because they knew about it, they know how easy it's going to be to get through. And I think that's the other thing, is that people think, okay, I get school choice. You talked to me about it. I understand now. So my problem now is that it's impossible to get through. You can't get it through. Well, I'm standing here. You actually have physical proof that it can be done. I did it, and people say, well, how did you do it? And I said, well, I'm part ninja, first of all. It's true. Nobody even saw it coming, did you? How many people didn't know about that we were doing it in Nevada until after it was done? Hardly anybody can say, oh, yeah, I knew that was going to pass. With the confidence that comes with a successful NBA player who's always in the finals, right? Is inevitable, right? Now, nobody knew it was coming. I worked hard at that, but nobody knew because most of the time it was behind the scenes. But it can be done. You have to look at the political climate. You have to look at who you're dealing with, and you really have to, in some states, you're going to have to look at who you can get on board from the other side of the aisle. That's just the way it is. You have to get parents on board. As soon as we passed the education savings accounts in Nevada, polls were being taken all over the place. They're trying to figure out, measure the level of support. And believe it or not, those who are the most disadvantaged in the school system that we have, the one where you buy a house and then you have to go to the school that's in your zip code, and you really can't afford to sell your house and buy somewhere else where there's a better school. Those are the people that love the ESA the most. Those are the people who go, as soon as it's explained to them, they're the ones who go, I have it now, I'm not going to let it go. They're fighting for it now. We're fighting 2 lawsuits, and they're fighting for this because they see this as an opportunity for their child to get out of the situation that they're in, because they can't afford to sell their house and then move into some other place. Can't do it. And so they see the ESA as a way to get through to their child, get them a good education. I know some of you guys are shaking your head. And come to find out, you know what? The education savings account has a lot of benefits for education in the system that we have, but I've come to find out that it actually has a lot of other practical applications. Let me give you a couple. And by the way, for those of you who are listening and thinking he's kind of all over the place, I sort of am. When Ben called me up the other day and said, hey, I'm really excited about you being here. I want you to, really wow him like you did in Boston, give that same speech. And so I hung up the phone and I told my wife what Ben said, and she started laughing because she knows me so well. She knows I never write anything down. I don't know what I said in Boston. I just go in and I look at the audience, and of course there's bright lights, so I can't really see. I can't see if you're smiling at me. I can't see if you're shaking your head really. Just a few people here and there. And I took my glasses off, which means I can't see the people in the back because I got to read this in a second because I wrote down some notes. Don't tell my wife. And so she just laughed. She said, I hope you do well. Because, she's always scared that I'm going to mess things up and then the family name is shot. Because you know what they say. Behind it, my wife thinks I've actually gotten to some level of success in my career. She says, but you know what they say about every successful man? Behind every successful man is shocked mother-in-law. That's what it was. A surprised mother-in-law, and mine is definitely surprised. Although, again, some people don't categorize my success as success or my work as success. But yeah, definitely surprised. So my wife said, "Yeah, well, we'll do your best." Well, I'll tell you. I decided to come on these tours or come out to states when people invite me every single time because as soon as the ESAs were passed in Nevada, the first thing that happened were there were op-ed pieces placed in the newspapers, stories written, basically saying that the only reason why I passed is so I can go out there and do these kinds of things. And the reality is if I don't come out and explain why we passed an ESA or what it is and why it's important to have, then really they're going to write the narrative for why I did this. And I don't want them to fill in why I did this. I'll tell you why I did this. I believe that we're at the age now where we can actually decide who and how someone's going to get educated. I love the fact that you talked about one of the micro, education delivery systems that you have right here. Started off as sort of a small group of homeschool students. That's who's coming to me now. We're having small groups of people come to me and say, we start off as a sort of a homeschool network, but now thanks to your ESA, we can actually afford really good curriculum. We can actually start to hire a few people to come and talk to us for an hour and a half on Mondays or Wednesdays or Fridays. We can start to mold our education system around what we want. And that's why I did it. I didn't pass an education savings account so that we can take public money and pump it into private schools. I know the private schools are the beneficiaries of this. They love it. They're grateful. They tell me all the time, but that's not why I did it. I said, you are, as a private school, now you have to compete. You're going to have to compete with all these new education delivery systems that are popping up everywhere because now they have an opportunity. You're going to have to compete with the people who say, hey, we can mold an education specifically tailored to your child. That's what you're going to have to compete against, not just the public schools. And public schools, yeah, they're going to have to compete too. And you see that. In our own school district in Clark County, we finally have a superintendent who's starting to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and introduce more magnet schools. I've been in Clark County, Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada for over 20 years. I got there in 1993, and there were about 3 or 4 magnet schools when I got there. Wildly successful, people trying to get in, very competitive. You had to get your child, then not only did you have to get your child in, then you had to figure out how to get your child to the school. Some kids getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning just to get to these magnet schools. But they were wildly successful because they catered to what the child wanted to do later on in life. The child actually thought, okay, I'm gonna have a purpose for going to school instead of just sitting there. Them telling me what I needed to take every day. I'm excited because I'm going to be in aviation, I'm going to be in nursing, I'm going to do this. They loved it. Now all of a sudden you see charter schools really expand in the state of Nevada. We're really getting a foothold in the state of Nevada. I've been a part of a charter school for 5 years. I was on the founding board of a charter school that now has 5 campuses. I now work as an administrator in that 5th campus. We have a waiting list of around anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 kids yearly. At each one of our campuses. So charter schools are becoming wildly successful. So what is the reaction of the public school system? We're going to create, first of all, they decided to open enrollment in all their campuses, let students decide, okay, if I don't like where I'm at here, I'm going to go somewhere else. I just have to find a way to get there, right? Or they also started to expand their magnet school programs. I really feel that that's a direct result of competition that is coming into the valley, our valley. Why not take it a step further? Why not give the child the money and let them decide what school fits them or what delivery system fits them? Again, I didn't just do this because I wanted to take money from the private or public sector and put it into private schools. I did this because every child needs to decide how to wrap that system around them. I was once talking to a gentleman, very well known, I won't mention his name, but he and I were talking, and it seems that we also saw the same documentary years and years ago. Neither one of us could remember the name of it. We just remember watching bits and pieces of it. This is pre-World War II. Jewish children were no longer able to go into public schools. And so some of the retired professors at some of the universities, and I think I'm going to get the name. It wasn't Germany. It was actually in Austria, I believe. They decided, we're going to start to educate some of these kids. And so they had 30, 40 kids that would come in, 3 would spend some time with a physics professor, and then they'd spend an hour and a half playing violin, and then they'd go and spend some time doing some other math. And different groups of kids would go to different houses in that same neighborhood. They just kind of go around and get an education. And like I said, there was like 30 or 40 kids in this system. Turns out that every single one of those kids received a Nobel Prize sometime in their life. Shocked, right? That is what we call educating to a purpose. Kid finally decides what he wants. All right, one of my favorite movies is October Sky, where Homer Hickam all of a sudden sees Sputnik going across the sky, and he, like many other people of that generation, went, wow, we can do this. And it just he caught the bug. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is where he actually is starting to develop a love for doing this. He's gone on it a couple of times. He realized that his rockets aren't very sophisticated. He's got to get a little bit better. Some sort of rocketry system, fuel system needs to be developed. And so his math teacher, who's always trying to push him and get him to do more, says, the math is complicated. You have to learn different math. You have to learn. He goes, just give me the book. I'll learn the math. He was not a very good math student up until that time, but he figured out what he wanted to do. And as soon as he figured out what he wanted to do, he was motivated. That's what an education savings account does. And let me tell you a little bit about what we did in Nevada. We passed a bill that allows 90% of the distributive school account to follow a child. 90% of the distributed school account, that's the account that we use per pupil funding at the state level. None of the local taxes went to the education savings account. The federal money is not going there. It's just the DSA, because that's what I could get. 90%. Now, of course, if you are 150% of the poverty level or lower, then you're getting 100% of that. That was a nice little move that occurred when they came in and said, hey, we'd love to means test this. What are you going to do for the kids? They're complaining that it was 90%. And, some of my adversaries are saying, oh, you're taking money away. You're not doing enough for the kids. You're not doing enough for the kids. So I sat down in my room and I said, you know what? They're right. So if you really are in need of more help, we'll give you 100%. They never came back and complained about that kind of stuff anymore. And they just kind of went, all right, because we're afraid that if we complain again, he's going to find 110% somewhere. So we gave them 100% of the DSA. They take that money, they put it in a financial institution that holds the account. We disperse the money quarterly to cut down on any kind of fraudulent activity. And then we allow them, according to the treasurer's office, to choose an education delivery system that works for them, whether it be a private school comes in and says, hey, we'd like to be approved by the treasurer's office, we meet these criteria, a set of criteria, boom. If we're a tutor, and of course they have to be an accredited tutor, they go on there. Curriculum, not a problem. If you have curriculum that they can use, it has to also be approved by the treasurer's office. It's added to a list. So once all that stuff is added to a list, then the parent then decides how they're going to use the education savings account. We have some schools in Nevada that are very costly, and some people are pointing out to me, well, now you just made it's too prohibitive. So great, now you gave $5,100 to a student, they'll never be able to get into a Meadows or a Bishop Gorman. And I said, yeah, but we have on the majority of our private schools, and we don't have very many private schools compared to what you have here in Georgia and other places, but that's about to change, right? My good friend here, and I'll never forget this, and she said this, if you're in education, if you print books or you deliver education or you're a school or you have anything to do with education, if you're not in Nevada right now, I don't know what's wrong with you. And I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's about the gist of it right there. And I've told people that all the time. Well, guess what? People call me now and they are coming to Nevada. We've got funding that's coming to Nevada. They want to expand the private school situation as well as other micro delivery systems. They want to do that. And so right now we have a very few number of private schools or other kinds of education delivery, but there's several schools actually who are below the $5,100 that we're giving out to each child. One school, $3,900 a year, a little less than that if you have more than one sibling going to the school. So that means you're expending less money than the $5,100. So now you can go out and go, okay, my child also has a speech therapy problem. They have a speech problem. That's not a problem. Now you can go out and hire somebody. Matter of fact, I ran into, of all places, if the pumpkin patch, there's only one that exists in Nevada. And I think that they actually buy them at stores and throw them out there. I'm pretty sure. Well, this is Southern Nevada, not Northern Nevada, but I'm pretty sure because it's a huge pumpkin. So out there talking, and a friend of mine introduces me to this lady who's a speech therapist. And we're casually talking, and she said that her business is great. She's got so many students come to her. And I said, well, is business going to get better or is it going to get worse? She goes, oh, I think it's going to get better. They passed this thing called an education savings account in the state. And I said, oh, yeah, really? And she said, yeah, let me tell you, once that thing passes, now I'll have students who will come to me because now they can afford to. So they're getting their education, their daily education, 6 hours or 7 hours or 3 times a week at a brick and mortar school, but then they're coming to me or I'm going to them. So there's just, those ideas are popping up. People are starting to realize I can do a lot of stuff with this. So parents are going, okay, now if they don't spend, let's say they do have the $3,900, they don't need extra help. Maybe their student is an ELL, English language learner. Maybe they don't have a speech problem. Maybe they're great in math. They don't have any other needs. Well, that's okay because now they can roll over the remainder of the $5,100, the $5,100 less the $3,900, and they can roll it over to the next year. This teaches great conservative principles of, you're saving money. You're finding the best education you can for the money, and then you're saving, you're rolling it over. So these students who are in this one Catholic school, St. Anne's, I believe, they spend $3,900 a year from the moment they're in kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade. You roll over the money, Now all of a sudden they want to go to the big school, the Bishop Gorman. Now they have that much more money to go to that big school that costs a lot more money. That and of course we also passed education savings, opportunity scholarship in Nevada that allows corporations to give money, and then of course this is means tested. The more you need it, the more money you potentially have. You can also have access to that money. You couple that money with the education savings account, and you're going to schools that you never thought you had any possible chance of going to. That's the bottom line. We are giving hope to people. I thought, Arthur Brooks did a great job talking about hope, talking about gratitude, and talking about a change of mind and bringing joy and happiness into our lives. That we're on this earth in order to be happy. Well, that's what it's all about. Trying to find a way to get students to understand that they have options in their life. And that, to me, is what the ESA done. And if that makes me a rock star, then that's okay. I'll take that. Because I can preach this all day long. I can talk about this all day long. And because, that's, to me, is what we're gaining here. We're gaining the opportunity for kids to go somewhere where they never thought they had a chance to go. Now, that's principally how the ESA works. We've put a couple other things in there. We also were cognizant of the fact that people complain that with school choice, you keep preaching, let them choose, but then you don't give them a way to get to the school. So a portion of that bill, we put in there a little thing that said, if you are eligible for an ESA, then you can spend $750 of that $5,100 on transportation every year. So it gives them money that they normally wouldn't have in order to get them there. But that may never be used by some. I think that some of the schools who really want to see the students get there, they'll find a way to transport them. That's the way the market works. But we put that in there so that they have that opportunity. What are some other? I want to make sure I talk about some of the other components of it. We learned a lot from Arizona and Florida, especially Arizona, where this program passed, I think, in 2011. We were worried about fraudulent charges, and so we put a lot of things in there. We, again, dispersed quarterly. We also shut it down over the summer unless you can show the treasurer that you were going to use it over the summer, you have a program, and so forth. We wanted to make sure that people weren't taking expensive trips with this, so they have to turn in their invoices on a quarterly basis, I believe. There's just a lot of things that we were worried about when it came to fraud, so we put that stuff in there. We understand this is taxpayer dollars, and that everybody has a right to know that nobody's abusing the system. I don't think we're going to have a large number of people who are trying to abuse it, but if they do, we're right on top of it. So we put that in the bill as well. Now, getting back, I made a point earlier talking about a little bit about who I am and the fact that, I'm part ninja, because people always ask me, how do you get this thing through? And I said, well, I'm part ninja. Nobody believes that. So I do want to say this. I have a 4-year-old at home. Up until about 3 months ago, and some of you guys will totally understand this. You've been in my shoes. We couldn't get her potty trained, right? You didn't think you're going to show up today and hear somebody talk about being potty trained. Here you are. Couldn't get her potty trained. So here I am. I go to a function where people call me Senator Hammond. I go to school where they call me Mr. Hammond or Principal Hammond. Some of the kids do. And then I go home and I change diapers. I take garbage out on Wednesdays and Sunday nights when my son's not around. I go camping. I'm an average person. I think when you look up the name average in the dictionary, that my face appears. I'm not a great superstar. I'm really not. Just an average person. Like to watch baseball. Matter of fact, if you go to some of the Facebook pages I have, I got to spend a little bit of time in some of the ballparks this year, probably more time than my wife would like to have seen. But that's just an average guy. I go out and play basketball at 5 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays with my son, with a bunch of old guys, getting older. Just so average. And yet, the reason why I mention that is because so many people are so worried about how do you get this thing through. And so, if nothing else, by seeing me up here, I hope that other politicians start to get courage that this is possible. If that guy can do it, right? If that guy can do it, anybody can do it. You'll be as shocked as my mother-in-law is when you find out that this is just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other. A great story, and I want to tell this. I don't know how much time I have, so I'll just tell this story and then take questions, I think. But when I was in 3rd grade up in Alaska, a place called Fort Greely, Alaska, no one's ever heard of it unless you watch a lot of those documentaries on TV now. I had a teacher, her name was Mrs. Bomer. I thought the world of Mrs. Bomer. She kind of included sort of the public and, well, sort of the liberal and conservative ideas, and she wrapped them all together, right? She loved to teach in a public school, but she always would put everything we had to do for the day on the chalkboard that was never supposed to be around that long, right? Apparently. So she would put everything that she said, we're going to do this in math, this in reading, we're going to do this, and she put it on the board. She said, if you get it done before the first recess, you're done for the day. I'm like, man, I love her, you know? So I was like, well, I'm taking advantage of that. So I'm done before the recess almost every single day. Now, of course, she would read all the stuff. She would look at the stuff, and she felt like you didn't understand what was going on. She sat, you didn't know that because you were only in third grade, but she would sit you down and she'd start talking to you one-on-one or small groups. That's how she kind of, diversified or differentiated her instruction. Of course, we didn't know all that stuff back then. We just thought we were back there in the back playing games all day. It was great, right? Of course, we had social studies we do together in the afternoon, things like that, but that was nothing. I mean, we really just got in there and we got our work done. So one day, we were in the back. There was about 4 of us. We were sitting there cleaning the sink. You know how you have jobs in elementary? Everybody had a specific job. You guys probably don't remember this because you haven't been in an elementary school, but there's like these little bathrooms in some of the classrooms, and there's sinks and all this other stuff. Well, my job was to clean the sink or around the sink area. And here I am with, I think it was Rosemary Foster, Eric, my good friend Mike Marshall, and then one other guy, that Rex, I think. Rex never got to school on time, by the way, but you don't need to know that. Never got on school on time. So here we're sitting there cleaning, and we're sitting there, as third graders, and we're sitting there thinking, Miss Bomer is awesome, isn't she? She's great. Whatever words we were using back then, I know it wasn't de bomb or anything like that, but we were just saying what a great person she is. And then one of us said, hey, should we do something nice for her? That's a great idea. What should we do? Let's have a party for her. So we decided that moment to have a party for Mrs. Bomer. So then we started talking to people who actually, can take an idea and make it work. So we talked to our mothers, and we said, this is what we'd like to do. Miss Bomer is great. She's a wonderful teacher. Let's have a party for her. So we decided to have a surprise party. And so before you know it, we had mothers and us. We started planning on the food that we were going to have, the day we were going to do it. And then we decided, well, we had to have a gift. Let's have a gift. And so it was decided, probably by mothers again, that we were going to make a skirt for her. We can't make a skirt, right? So it had to have been the mothers. So we're going to make a skirt. Now, back then, they had these like acrylic paints, the ones that roll up. Some of you guys, I can't tell if some of you guys are saying you do remember that, right? Those acrylic paints. So here we have these acrylic paints, and somebody got some like burlap sack kind of material. I thought it was like really scratchy or something. Why would anybody pick that? But one of the mothers picked it. So we decided, all right, well, Mrs. Bomer's not around. We're going to go ahead and write. We're going to make designs. Everybody's going to make their own design, put their name on it. So you can imagine what the skirt looks like at the end, right? I mean, just 1,000 colors. Probably just as hideous as can be. We had the surprise party. We called her down to the principal's office. She came back to the classroom. All of a sudden, the cake is there. Everything's there. We're having a great time. We gave her that present. It wasn't until like 10 years later, right after my senior year, I graduated. I see Miss Bomer in the supermarket, and we were recalling that day, and we were discussing how it happened. And then I said, well, you probably hated that skirt. And looking back, it was just hideous. I know that, and I'm sorry that we gave that to you. And she looked at me and gave me that, that teacher look sometimes of disappointment. And she said, Scott, I pull that out at least once or twice a year, and I wear it. And it has some of the most amazing memories attached to it. And I think what an incredible gesture it was on your part. And that's when I realized how I impacted her life. I impacted her life because I and my friends made one suggestion: why don't we do something nice for her? And I tell this story a lot because people say it's impossible to get something done. It's impossible to do. And I say the journey starts with one step. And that's the way it did for me. When the Friedman Foundation and I talked, I said, this is what I want for Nevada. This is what we need to have. We need this because the children deserve this. The status quo is not working for us. We're not getting anywhere. We're at the bottom of every educational list. Why don't we do something radical like attach the money to every child and let them go out there and get an education? Nobody thought it was going to be possible. Matter of fact, every time I turned around, somebody kept coming to me saying, hey, why don't you scale it back a little bit? Maybe if you scale it back, it'll work. I said, well, no one's asked me to scale it back. None of my colleagues have. Why am I going to negotiate against myself? I said, we're going full steam ahead. I'm not stopping. And so when it did get difficult and it sat in Senate Finance where everybody assumed it was going to die, I just kept talking to my colleagues, kept working it, kept massaging it, and before you know it, the governor got on board with it. And all of a sudden, it started picking up speed and steam. And then right at the end of the session, when I had already taken several steps, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get it through. And I kept taking those steps until finally somebody said, okay, we're going to get it out of Senate Finance. We just have to make one small little tweak to it. There was a tweak that I had that allowed you to roll over the savings account, even into higher ed. So that if you were smart with your money, you saved your money, and you really were handling your money correctly, then you can actually use it for higher ed purposes, which I still think we need to get that in there. Maybe to cover the cost of an annual tuition your first year and your freshman year of college. I still think that component needs to be in there. And so he said, look, I'm just not comfortable with it. We need to get that out of there for right now. And so I did. And then as soon as that happened, and a few minor other things, we got it out of Senate Finance, onto the Senate floor, over to the Assembly where we had a hearing on it, and they actually took a vote on it the night that they had the hearing. They took the first vote on it that night, and then the next day, so this was all within 3 days, the next day they voted out of the Assembly. And then my good friend Michael Chartier, or Chartier as he says it, he pronounces his name wrong, from Freeman Foundation, he showed up at my office the next day. And I sat down in my chair and I said, hey, good to see you, Michael. He sat across from me on a chair and he started taking pictures of me just sitting there. And I said, this is really freaking me out. What are you doing? And he said, you just made history. You have no idea how your life just changed. And I said, no, I just took a step. That's all I did. I took a step. I appreciate you listening to this story. Appreciate all those who are attendants today, especially my good friends who have traveled a long ways to get here. But thank you very much, and God bless.